Okay, very good afternoon, everyone. So I hope you all had a good lunch with us. So on these sessions, I'm so proud that we have all female panelists with me, three distinguished ladies, which will delve into the issues of how financial services could transform women's lives. So here with me today, the first panelist will be Ibu Laksmi from the Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection of the Republic of Indonesia. Selamat datang Ibu Laksmi, terima kasih banyak sudah bisa hadir bersama kami hari ini. And the second panelist will be Marina Dimova. Thank you so much, Marina, for coming all the way to Jakarta. Marina is the Global Director of Financial Industries and Network Advocacy of Women's World Banking, based in New York. So you are from half world away from New York. And one of the missions of the Women's World Banking Global Network is to expand the economic assets, participations, and power of low-income women and their household by helping them access financial services, knowledge, and markets. So Amarta has been the Women's World Banking Global Network member since 2022. And also Amarta is one of the investee of Women's World Banking Asset Management, or WAM. And since 2017, Amarta has been the research partners of Women's World Banking. So we published several articles and publications working together with Women's World Banking. Last but not least, coming all the way from Reading, United Kingdom, Dr. Sarah Carde. She is the associate professor at the University of Reading, based in UK. She's also the program director for communication for developments and applied international developments at the University of Reading in the UK. And I'm so proud to introduce Sarah as well as my PhD supervisor. So thank you so much for joining this forum and coming all the way to Jakarta. Thank you. So let's start with a very fundamental questions. My first question will go to Ibu Laksmi. Ibu Laksmi, sebagai perwakilan dari pemerintah, mewakili Kementerian Pemberdayaan Perempuan dan Perlindungan Anak, bagaimana strategi dari pemerintah untuk memastikan bahwa gender gap itu bisa dikurangi dari waktu ke waktu, dan bagaimana kita bisa memperluas akses pembiayaan terhadap perempuan dan UMKM yang dipimpin oleh perempuan. Silakan Bu Laksmi.
Baik, terima kasih Mas Arya. Jadi saya Indonesian ya, nanti udah ada interpreternya. Jadi kami di Kementerian Pemberdayaan Perempuan dan Perlindungan Anak memang sangat erat ya terkait isu gender ini. Nah, kami bekerja, kebetulan juga ada arahan Presiden, salah satunya adalah pemberdayaan perempuan di kewirausahaan. Jadi 5 arahan Presiden itu pemberdayaan perempuan, kemudian pengasuhan keluarga yang lebih baik, pendidikan yang lebih baik, penurunan pekerja anak, penurunan kekerasan, dan penurunan perkawinan anak. Nah, jadi pemberdayaan perempuan di kewirausahaan ini adalah merupakan entry point. Jadi segala permasalahan yang berhubungan dengan kekerasan dan masalah anak itu hampir 90% based on ekonomi. Nah, jadi untuk itulah kami ingin memberdayakan perempuan ini agar mandiri secara finansial, independent in financial. Nah, kemudian dengan cara apa? Dengan cara memberdayakan mereka, memberikan mereka pelatihan, bimbingan teknis, agar memiliki jiwa kewirausahaan sehingga mereka mampu berdiri sendiri. Itu tadi. Nah, kemudian kami fokusnya terutama untuk perempuan rentan dan perempuan penyintas kekerasan. Itu yang kami lakukan. Sudah tentu kami tidak bisa bekerja sendiri, ya. Jadi kami banyak memiliki stakeholder, banyak memiliki partner, mitra yang kami ajak untuk bersama-sama memikirkan bagaimana perempuan ini, karena kita tahu jumlah perempuan atau penduduk perempuan di Indonesia adalah hampir setengah. Jadi dari 278,8 juta, 50%-nya adalah perempuan. Dan hampir usia produktif itu hampir 60%, ya 69% itu usia produktif. Nah ini kan berarti sumber daya yang harus dikelola dengan baik. Karena ini kan modal kita. Nah, kalau ini dikelola dengan baik, sudah tentu kalau kita lihat perempuan Indonesia di masa pandemi COVID, siapa yang menyelamatkan kita sehingga kita tidak terpuruk? Perempuan. Nah, kemudian perempuan yang mana? Perempuan yang mau berusaha. Berusaha yang mana? Kalau yang besar-besar sudah pasti ya, ada yang ditutup perusahaannya, kemudian ada yang dirumahkan pegawainya, tetapi ultra mikro ini hidup. Walaupun bekerja sekarang, dihasilkan sekarang, untuk makan sekarang. Tapi ini yang berhasil menyelamatkan kita. Itu yang patut kita perhatikan. Jadi kami di kementerian berangkat dari situ, jadi berpedoman dari situ. Jadi kami ingin bagaimana perempuan ini berdaya. Jadi kami melakukan BIMTEK, bimbingan teknis, begitu. Ya.
Baik. Setiap tahun Amarta menerbitkan sebuah laporan penelitian yang kami lakukan, yaitu kami menyebutnya Amarta Grassroots Entrepreneurs Report Series. For those of you who wants to have the full copy of this report, you can download it from our website or through our apps later on. So berdasarkan report kami yang terbaru, di Indonesia itu ada sekitar 36 juta usaha mikro dan kecil yang dipimpin atau nakodai oleh perempuan. Dan sayangnya banyak di antara mereka yang masih mengalami kendala dalam hal akses terhadap keuangan terutama. Seperti yang Bu Laksmi sampaikan, salah satu kendala untuk bisa memberdayakan mereka adalah secara ekonomi begitu. Nah, kira-kira tentunya untuk bisa menyelesaikan persoalan ini tidak hanya tanggung jawab dari pemerintah. Tentunya ada keterlibatan berbagai aktor. Menurut Ibu Laksmi, siapa saja yang kira-kira bisa menjadi partner strategis dari pemerintah untuk memastikan bahwa women-led MSMEs ini bisa mendapatkan pendanaan yang cukup, pelatihan yang cukup, sehingga mereka bisa setara secara ekonomi dan lebih berdaya.
Baik. Mereka sudah punya modal untuk mau, jadi will-nya mereka ada. Nah tetapi mereka where we can start from. Jadi apa? Otomatis dari permodalan. Nah permodalan ini di samping memang pemerintah, tapi kalau pemerintah kan melalui KUR juga ada syarat-syarat yang nggak bisa. Nah kita juga tidak ingin bahwa perempuan kita terjebak ojol, ya. Pinjol, pinjaman online. Kemudian kemana nih? Nah di sini pentingnya partner dan mitra kami. Nah salah satunya kami sudah ada dengan yang berupa BUMN ya. Dengan lembaga permodalan seperti itu. Nah ini harapan kami tuh banyak amarta-amarta yang lain yang muncul. Ini karena apa? Karena ya itu yang akan menolong mereka begitu. Nah kemarin ini kita lihat dan saya udah koordinasi dengan tim juga. Oh Amarta udah kerjasama nih sama Kementerian PPPA. Melalui apa kemarin? Jadi tahun lalu ya, itu melalui Desa Ramah Perempuan dan Anak. Nah ini kan juga sesuatu yang bagus ya, yang harus terus dilakukan dan bersinergi kitanya untuk keberpihakan kita kepada perempuan terutama di inklusi keuangan. Karena mereka butuh modal. Itu yang bisa saya jawab.
Nanti kita akan kembali explore ke kementerian. Okay, so my next panelist will be Marina Dimova. So Marina, WWP is leading advocate for financial inclusions for women, and could you share more some of the success stories that becomes the examples of innovative initiative that you have done to increase the access of financial services for women and women-led, especially MSMEs?
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So I wanted to start by doing a heartfelt thank you to our longstanding partner, Marta, for having us here. It's such a pleasure to be a full partner for the conference. And then to thank Marta for the incredible work it's doing in the Indonesia market, specifically supporting low-income women, entrepreneurs in this market. And it's really a pleasure to be here and representing Women's World Banking. So to your question, Women's World Banking has been in existence for 45 years. We are celebrating our 45th anniversary this year. And really, over all of this time, we have been dedicated to serving the nearly 1 billion women customers that do not have access to formal financial services. And we really do these in two ways. First, as a nonprofit organization, we focus on working with the private sector and with policymakers and regulators to help develop programs, policies, and products that really work for women customers. Then on the other hand, we are also an investor, and in our investment portfolio, we really work with our portfolio companies to advocate and help them both achieve gender equality within their workforce, as well as be able to reach more women customers and serving them effectively. And I think with both of these approaches, we firmly believe that financial inclusion is essential in the path to women's economic empowerment. And we know that low-income women are disproportionately impacted by the effects of systemic shocks and more recently, climate change. So that's why we believe financial inclusion is essential towards women's path to economic empowerment. And our work is really focused on providing both access as well as effective usage of financial services. So in how we do that, we really, especially in the work in the finance sector, we focus on effective product design by leveraging a methodology we call women-centered design. We took a lot of time packaging the methodology that really allows us to put the woman at the center of understanding their needs, understanding her perspectives, and doing that effectively to drive social impact, which is really important. But on the other hand, we believe that it is critical for products to be commercially viable and successful in the market. So the flip side of the methodology really allows for the financial institution to be able to create a process, a product, a distribution system that makes sense and is both sustainable but also profitable for them, because only by marrying the two, the profitability and the social impact, we actually could be successful in the long term, which is critical from our perspective to drive the strong systemic change we need in order to tackle this very big gap we still have about billion women underserved, unserved. And then one example I'll give with this is that over the course of deploying the women-centered design methodology, we've currently partnered with 34 institutions to develop products. So 34 new products in the market, all across the emerging markets that currently are allowing for 29 million women to be better served by the financial system. So something we're very proud of.
Okay, we'll deep dive on that later. So I'm going to go to Sarah, Professor Sarah Karde. So Sarah, your discipline is very unique in between the intersections of gender, women empowerment, international development, rural development, and also communication for development. When we are talking about changes, then it involves communication for development disciplines. Could you elaborate more on your works and how it helps us in understanding more on how we should help women to get more access to financial self-reliance, and also when we are talking about digital transformations, what supports needs to be available for them?
Sure. Go to the next slide, please.
Yeah. We have a clicker.
So I'm going to go, communication for development is about communication processes. And one of the things we need to do is I come at this from, about 5 different disciplines. One way to look at this is in order for us to have a positive effect on women's lives and to achieve goals of equity, we need to have evidence. We need to have evidence-driven interventions. We need to build capacity, and we have to have context-driven solutions. And that is often not the case for the design of programs, and that's where we start to have projects failing. And that's where we can actually increase inequalities if we don't understand where we're coming from. So one of the things that's important is understanding why listening and articulating and exploring unheard voices is important. The people who are usually left out of conversations are the ones that we're trying to support. So we have to take a step back and listen to them. We have to unpack what their stories are. It's not necessarily just the story of, for instance, a small business developing. It's what does that mean for them? Where did the business come from? Why is this important in their lives and in their communities and in their household? How can this help them negotiate a better gender position within the household? It means more than one story, so we need to be able to unpack those things. We also can see research as advocacy. Research is never neutral. And I think a lot of the people who are speaking today, organizations have research think tanks. And I think that that's fundamentally something we understand. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the think tanks to start with. So understanding how to ask questions, how to unpack the issues around inequality are pretty fundamental. And it helps us then to think about, okay, how do we link with other actors to work together, to network, to be able to have greater impact and to be able to do more things. That's where communication comes from. Fundamentally, the people who are intermediaries between a program that's providing credit or that's providing support for business development and the person who's developing their business, those intermediaries are communication actors. So while communication is often seen as marketing, it's not. It's community development, it's adult education, and it drives rural innovation. People need information. They need new ideas, and they need the right information at the right time from people who have good communication skills. Communication isn't a natural thing. It's a set of skills that allows you to support empowering people. It allows you to support dialogue. More often than not, actors who go into communities want to talk a lot and listen very little, and we need to flip the script. So that's part of why communication is fundamental. And we also, comes from an understanding that farmers are fundamentally innovative, and rural businesses are fundamentally innovators. So what we need to do if we want to support equitable business, if we want to support digital transformation, is to start from that understanding. But men and women use different technologies in different ways. Women will co-opt technology and make it work for them if they have the tools and the skills. But it's also influenced by social differentiation, so age, marital status, gender, all of these have an impact on who chooses to use what technology. And we need to focus on the people and understanding why do they make the choices they do, how does that affect how they use different technologies, and that then allows us to ensure that financial services and banking services are as inclusive as possible. So it fundamentally comes down to understanding the human being, how they communicate, and what those processes are. How do we support inclusive dialogue with marginalized communities, because it's a long-term process and it's difficult and it involves a lot of trust building, but it involves networking, bringing different people, bringing government actors, bringing private sector, bringing public sector, bringing academics all to the table so that we contribute the different skills to be able to support people as they change and as their context changes and they respond to it.
We've seen that there are advanced developments in the area of communications for development. There are many published research on that area as well. But we also see that many research finding evidence are kept within the campus wall. So it's not yet disseminated to the public who really needs it. So what's your approach? What's your strategy to make sure that this discourse within the research arena could also benefit the real world, especially in helping the vulnerable groups, the minority groups, the MSMEs, rural villagers to benefit from the research findings like this?
I mean, I think you're right. It's fundamental that research doesn't stay within a university. I didn't become an academic so that everything that I work on stays within the university. What's the point? There's a huge need for impact. So how do you do that? Some of that is working in partnership with different organizations. So groups like Amarta, like Women's World Banking, we need to have dialogue with one another, to collaborate with one another. I mean, I'm very conscious I come from a university in the UK. I work extensively with universities around the world, some of whom already have an extension mandate, for instance. Part of the mandate of the university is to provide community development services, to provide extension. So partnership is a fundamental part of that process. It gets projects out of the academic realm and into the real world, but also working with communities themselves, working to co-create knowledge, get rid of the idea that you have to be an academic to create knowledge. Academics can be facilitators. I know how to run focus groups. I know how to do participatory research. I know how to design something that is going to get the voices of people within communities talking about their lives. My job is then to be quiet and to listen, and then work to understand where people are coming from. Then how do we disseminate? We work with policy so that we have policy actors can access the information. We work with private sector and public sector, and I think that's something that needs improvement. Absolutely. But you work in partnership with one another so that you can share the findings. We can bring something to the table in terms of really good, transparent research, but then we also need to offer, hey, this is what we're finding, because it does have implications for the real world.
Right. So partnership is really the key to make
Fundamental.
knowledge relevant to those who really need it.
Absolutely. Partnerships and engagement as equals.
Thank you. Marina, you've talked a lot about digital financial capability because as you know, we are in the digital transformations era. But you also see that DFC, digital financial capability, is not a silver bullet to solve financial inclusion issues. However, it has to be the direction that financial services should be going. Could you elaborate more on that statement?
Yeah, very good question. Thank you, Arya. So you're right that currently we have more and more of finance moving to be digital. So if we're talking about inclusive, if we're talking about equitable finance, we really need to bring everyone along. And we tend to see that women are more likely to be left alone in that transition to digital financial services, and we see that in the data. And I think one solution to that, and I'll come back to the topic of women-centered design, is first designing products, digital financial products that are intuitive and easy to use. I think sometimes the tendency is to create something that, you know, somebody with a lot of education can use and just say, well, we'll give education so low-income populations can use it as well. And I think that's not necessarily the right approach, putting the onus on disadvantaged populations to kind of level up to the product. So I always would say, as a designer, starting from simple design is the best solution. And I think that even is not enough. So I think that there is a strong role for digital financial capability, and that could be financial capability, so skills around finance. It could be digital capabilities, how do you use a smartphone and other digital tools, and it could be the combination, digital financial capabilities, so how do you manage your finances using a smartphone. So all of these components are critical, and designing them in an effective way is also critical in order for them to be fully effective. And what we have seen about this, and Women's World Banking has studied this topic for quite a while. We have a very practical practitioner's guide for financial services providers for how to do digital financial capabilities for their customers and bundle it with products. So we don't feel that, or we don't think that it needs to be a standalone. We really advise for digital financial capability to be bite-sized, critical little bits, pieces of knowledge that you learn as you need them, so you can immediately apply them in your daily life, be it opening an account, making a transfer, making a payment, instead of a course. So that's why we really abstain from calling it financial literacy or financial education. It's not about abstract knowledge, it's about practical applied knowledge that is really digestible, easy to learn and use in a very intuitive way. So I think that's very, very important. And I think I'll add one more thing to this broader topic, because I think it's important when we talk about the grassroots economy, which is really based on entrepreneurs, and here we're talking about women entrepreneurs. It's not only about digital financial capability. They would really benefit from business skills. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're running a business, even if it's a small business, these business management skills are critical. And bundling those with credit, so as financial services providers, even as investors that can advocate to your financial services providers, this concept of bundling the credit with business skills training is so critical. And this is something that I focus on a lot of this year, and we have new content of really what are the essential skills that small entrepreneurs need to learn and how to teach them to them in an effective way. So we run train the trainer programs to financial services providers. So I think ultimately what I believe is, if we're talking about women entrepreneurs, the business management skills are critical. On the other hand, digital skills for being an effective entrepreneur in a digital economy are critical. And on top of that, we talked about digital financial capability. That's another aspect. And when you put all of these three components together, we have a very strong package of non-financial services or support services that can really help with kind of the broader support that women entrepreneurs need. So it's definitely not only about access to credit. It's not only about access to markets. These skills are really critical to really ensure that women entrepreneurs thrive and the economies that they contribute to thrive as well.
So it's a whole package that you need to acquire: digital skill, access to finance, and also the entrepreneurial skill itself. It has to be combined to make sure
Absolutely.
that women are empowered economically.
And again, it needs to be combined, but I don't want it to sound that it's overpowering. It's too much to do. You literally can teach one tiny thing on one day, then another one at a different time. So like a bite-sized, piecemeal, learning by doing is really the most effective way to do
So
these.
those three pillars are sort of like complementing each other, but also uplifting each other.
Yes.
Thank you. Ibu Laksmi, kita barusan bicara tentang bagaimana di era transformasi digital ini kemampuan digital bagi perempuan itu sangat penting dan itu menjadi bagian yang tidak terpisahkan dari keseluruhan paket pemberdayaan perempuan, access to finance, kemampuan digital dan juga bagaimana kemampuan berusaha itu sendiri. Dari kacamata pemerintah regulator, bagaimana pemerintah Indonesia memandang level kesiapan digital bagi para perempuan-perempuan Indonesia, terutama para pengusaha mikro, dan apakah ada disparitas antara kota dan desa atau Indonesia Timur, Indonesia Barat dari kacamata pemerintah yang mengetahui semuanya. Mungkin Ibu bisa menjelaskan lebih jauh.
Baik, untuk saat ini ya, karena kemajuan teknologi kan udah pesat, sangat pesat bahkan ya. Jadi digitalisasi ini harus, sebuah keharusan ya. Nah kemudian bagaimana perempuan sekarang? Kalau saya lihat tuntutan untuk digitalisasi ini mutlak sekarang, kemudian kita sudah memberikan pendampingan terhadap para perempuan yang sudah kita latih begitu ya. Nah ini kan kita bilang yang sudah will-nya ada gitu ya, tekadnya dia ada gitu loh. Nah, kalau kita ngelihat sekarang minimal apa sih yang mereka punya gitu ya. Mereka bisa punya toko di cloud ya istilahnya. Kemudian kami bekerja sama dengan siapa nih, kami aja. Juga dengan teman-teman yang berusaha di platform misalnya marketplace seperti ya e-commerce seperti itu. Kami bekerja sama. Nah kemudian di samping tadi akses permodalan, juga kemampuan mereka. Nah literasi ini nggak sepenuhnya mereka kuasai. Ini pentingnya hadirnya. Kemudian kami juga sudah menggandeng Kementerian Infokom seperti itu. Tolong berikan mereka sharing pengetahuan tentang literasi digital. Kemudian yang digital lain deh, misalnya keuangan digital, ya, pemasaran digital dan lain sebagainya. Nah kalau saya perhatikan, kalau untuk kewilayahan di Indonesia bagian barat, jadi dari Pulau Jawa ke barat begitu, sudah berjalan dengan baik. Ya, artinya sudah bisa kita lepas, diawasin dari jauh tuh, kayak anak kecil misalnya yang baru belajar begitu diawasin dari jarak jauh, udah bisa mereka jalan. Tetapi bagaimana halnya di waktu Indonesia bagian tengah, Sulawesi ke timur, Bali ke timur nih. Kemudian apalagi yang di wilayah Indonesia Timur. Nah ini yang masih perlu banyak sentuhan. Jadi agar tidak mereka jadi apalagi kita bicara no one left behind sekarang ya. Nah kalau kita melihat ke zona wilayahan itu jelas WITA dan WIT masih jauh tertinggal dibandingkan dengan WIP begitu. Itu pandangan kami. Makanya karena kita juga tidak menutup ya fakta begitu, karena memang kan jarak, aksesibilitas, kemudian belum misalnya kalau kami ingin membimteki mereka, tiket harganya sekarang udah nggak karuan-karuan kan, jadi lebih murah ke luar negeri daripada di dalam negeri seperti itu. Nah ini adalah fakta yang harus kita hadapi memang. Nah di sini diperlukan juga kebijakan-kebijakan pemerintah yang memang pro ya pada perempuan, terutama untuk yang perempuan yang ingin kita berdayakan seperti itu.
Ya, yang seperti yang Ibu Laksmi sampaikan, itu juga sama seperti yang menjadi concern dari kami di Amarta. Oleh karena itu, kami di Amarta memberikan porsi yang lebih terhadap Indonesia Tengah dan Timur, termasuk dalam akses pembiayaan, di mana lebih dari 65% pembiayaan mikro UMKM-nya Amarta itu kami salurkan ke Indonesia Timur untuk memastikan bahwa akses yang lebih besar bisa didapatkan dan mudah-mudahan itu bisa berkontribusi terhadap penurunan gap gitu ya Bu ya, terutama dalam akses to finance.
Baik, terima kasih. Berarti terima kasih Amarta dalam hal ini, dan kami juga karena sebelumnya saya lihat juga Amarta concern dengan DRPPA ya, kami memulai, jadi kami ada namanya program Desa Ramah Perempuan dan Peduli Anak. Jadi that's a women's friendly village. Jadi Jadi start dari sana, karena kami ada terutama di poin yang ke-6 ya, jadi pemberdayaan perempuan di kewirausahaan. Nah ini bisa, jadi nanti kalau kami misalnya mengerjakan atau mau menggarap di RPPA ya, jadi nggak segan-segan kami akan telepon Amarta, ayo terjun, gitu ya. Jadi karena memang program yang terdahulu tahun lalu juga di Banyuwangi sukses ya, Amarta dengan DRPPA. Nah kami sekarang tahun ini bisa kita lanjutkan kembali.
Sarah, so we're discussing a lot about digital transformations and how to reduce the gaps, either skills gap or access to finance gap. As you know that these days financial services are mostly delivered online through the digital platforms, and it requires preparation from the customer side on how to onboard themselves into the digital society. So what are the insights from the research, from the evidence-based experiment that you have done on how to make sure that the digital transformations also benefits the vulnerable groups or those who are left behind?
We have to start by understanding where people are right now. People interpret, so technology isn't neutral, right? And so somebody might have a smartphone and that is not a neutral technology. Women often have very poor access to these kinds of technologies. So if we want to support women in being able to use them, things like taking bite-sized pieces and breaking it down becomes really important. It's not just the act of using the phone, but the technology itself and what that means. So if you're going to introduce mobile apps, for instance, first we need to understand, okay, yes, there's going to be, as we talked about, there can be apprehension. Some of that's going to come from the technology, but some of that is the context. Are women going to feel like they're being judged for using a technology when women's movement and mobility is often under scrutiny, when they don't have as much social power? What is that going to mean to them? That can cause a lot of anxiety. So start with, what does the technology mean to them? How can you then create a new story and a new narrative? Using hybrid approaches is often a really wise idea. It's not that women cannot use the technology. And in fact, what evidence tells us is that as soon as people take the technology on and adopt it, they run with it and they will make that technology work. There's a group of women tailors in Uganda that we met, and they used Pinterest to look at patterns. They're extremely good tailors. They could copy anything. So they would go on Pinterest, they would copy a pattern, and they used online social media to then sell their products overseas. Nobody taught them how to do that. They learned and adopted the technology and then embraced it and ran with it. So you start with, what are people confident in? You boost their confidence. We have to learn, literacy helps us learn how to be confident in ourselves as well as learning to read and write. So digital literacy is also boosting our confidence in being able to use a tool, particularly recognizing that marginalized groups have probably been told, you don't know how to do this, you're not smart enough to do this, and to use these tools. So you start with that, but always start from the position of the user, and then look at how to design things that is user-centered, that they recognize, and then work slowly, bite-sized pieces. And I think, I agree with everything you said. It makes a lot of sense to start bite-sized pieces, following the needs of the communities.
I'll make sure that approach is also part of my thesis and
You better.
PhD research. Thank you for the advice.
No problem.
Okay, so we're now moving to the Q&A session. So we've populated some of the questions from the audience. Let's go to the first questions. Oh, Sarah, you need to take this question. To Professor Sarah Carde, how can academic research help the government formulate policies to empower women in the multicultural environments of Indonesia?
So when you've got, I think, when you've got a place as diverse as Indonesia, you need to recognize that different different issues are going to be relevant in different parts of the country. So look at what is relevant in the local environment and in local communities. Don't try to create one thing that fits all of Indonesia. It's such a diverse place. We need to understand what's going on in each part of the country, and then what are common themes. I call them principles that travel. There are going to be commonalities and themes that are going to be true for much of the country, but very broad themes. So use those as principles, but localize. So do research with communities to understand what their perspectives are, what their needs are, how do they want and need to be supported, then translate that into policy. Don't try to impose one solution. So, and listen to local governments, and listen to local leaders as you're designing things, because they know their communities very well. So go from the bottom up and then let that inform policy. And academia is very good, and research is very good at breaking down those conversations in systematic ways where you can have honest conversations that bring out the stories that should be articulating community needs that can then feed into government policy.
Thank you. Next questions goes to Marina. I think we've covered part of this question. So more specifically, I would like to ask you, in terms of financial products for women, it has to be tailored to be suitable for their needs. So what's the best approach to make sure that financial services like Amarta or other financial services has a specific product that is tailored into more like gender lens kind of financial product?
It's a great question, and I would actually like to build on to what's something that Sarah just said. And it will be very simple, but I think if you remember one thing and start from there, you can go really far. So listen to your women customers is a simple step. You don't need methodologies. You don't need,
Just listen first.
Listen first. And remember to invite women at the table. So if you want to package it in a question, it will be, what would a woman customer say about that? And if you already designed a product, you might or might not have engaged women customers to contribute to the product design. It's okay if you didn't invite them up front. Invite them at a stage where they can provide their input. And if that means you need to adapt the product, so be it. But I think we sometimes overcomplicate things. The product for a woman needs to be different. It needs to be pink. That's a pet peeve of mine. It does not need to be pink. I don't like pink as a color. But nobody asked me like that as a child. So I had all these pink things that I didn't want. But it's again coming to that simple principle. Ask the customer what they want. And I mean, we're talking about women, but that is the same universal principle to any customer. Listen to them and engage them in the process of creating the product. Sarah also talked about that. So lots of agreement here, but really it is important to engage at different stages of the product development process. So a few kind of more tactical advice is when you start developing a product, even if it's not a new product, you're redesigning a product, really try to step in the shoes of the woman customer and imagine or ask them from their perspective, what's your pain point? What is the problem I need to solve for you? Don't assume what the problem is. Because for the bank, the problem could be connectivity, getting to the last mile, boosting profitability. For the woman, the problem might be entirely different. I can't leave my home. This is too far away. So solve for the woman's problem. So this is really around defining the problem. Then in trying to understand, well, what is causing that problem, invite women to talk to them. So let's call that your product design research phase or your design research phase. Invite women to the table, hear what they're experiencing. And again, I come from the field of design that is behavioral. So it's not only about what people say, and women, right? We're talking about women here. It's about what they do. So it's actually really powerful to observe what your women customers are doing, and even more importantly, what they are not doing. So like, where are the gaps? What is not happening? And if you can kind of create a map of where things are breaking down for a woman customer, that's a huge hint of what you need to fix to be serving this woman customer better. And then thirdly, when you are designing the product, it's really helpful to sit down with your product design team to mock up things, to create them in your office environment. What I'll advise you to bring them then to the field and have real customers or prospective customers or customers you want to gain to user test the product, and you see what's working and most importantly what's not working. Iterate on that, fix where things are broken before you launch the product, because that will save you so much money and so much headache down the process. So fail many times in the product development process and get all of this input from women customers. So once you launch something, it's going to work for your women customers. And what I always say is when a product is working well for women customers, it's working well for your late adopters, for your hesitant customers, for your elderly customers, for your reluctant male customers. So it's not like it works for women and for nobody else. It actually works for majority of customers, so it really helps ultimately be more inclusive. And then if you want to put it in business sense, reach a wider customer base, make more money, which is also very important. So I would say that's my advice. And then if you need a guide through it, Women's for Banking has a women-centered design kind of process paper that can help you through all of these steps. And later in the year, we'll be coming with a very tactical practitioner's guide. How do you design your research? Who do you go to talk to? What questions you ask? So stay tuned for that later in the year. Hopefully that will be helpful and very tactical steps of what to do.
So it's more like human-centered product design, participatory design kind of approach that is required to make it more generalized.
Absolutely. I think that's what really helps, because once you listen to your customer, you understand what they need, what they want, and you build a product that actually has legs and it's going to be used, because ultimately that's what you want.
Great. Okay, that's very valuable information. Next question goes to Ibu Laksmi. Bu Laksmi, ada pertanyaan spesifik. Bagaimana kita bisa mendesain, merancang sebuah program untuk memastikan bahwa kendala-kendala bagi para perempuan terutama dalam mengakses layanan keuangan itu bisa berkurang. Nah, apa yang kira-kira bisa dilakukan baik oleh pemerintah ataupun mitra pemerintah untuk memastikan bahwa barrier to access financial services bagi perempuan itu bisa kita kurangi perlahan-lahan?
Ya, satu-satunya cara, karena kami kan kementerian yang bersifat koordinatif ya, jadi kami bukan mengeksekusi langsung. Jadi kami istilahnya ketok pintu, kalau dengan kementerian kami ketok pintu tolong. Nah misalnya dengan OJK, jadi lembaga-lembaga keuangan baik negeri maupun pemerintah ya, pemerintah maupun swasta, maaf saya. Nah kemudian yang lebih lagi, nah tentu kalau dengan pemerintah kan ada prosedurnya. Nah tetapi yang lebih gampang, yang lebih sedikit gak ribet begitu ya, dengan lembaga-lembaga non pemerintah yang seperti Amarta ini yang bisa langsung ya ke grassroots. Iya langsung, karena kalau misalnya karena persyaratan kan pasti perempuan nanyain kartu keluarga berarti biasanya yang ini karena kita patrilineal berarti suaminya, kemudian suaminya ditanya buku tabungan atas nama suaminya juga, kemudian banyak sekali prosedur-prosedur seperti itu ya. Jadi kalau misalnya yang lembaga-lembaga swasta yang langsung bisa mengakar rumput yang seperti Amarta ini, ada juga permodalan nasional madani itu kami ajak juga, ayo sama-sama. Pokoknya siapa saja yang bisa membantu untuk tentunya yang sudah di dalam pengawasan OJK ya gitu, kami sarankan ayo ikut bersama-sama agar tidak lagi perempuan ini tergelincir begitu niatnya mau berdaya tapi mau jadi sengsara seperti itu. Itu yang kami lakukan, Mas Arya.
Ya, saya sangat mengapresiasi keterbukaan dari pemerintah untuk berkolaborasi dan menjadi pembimbing gitu ya Bu ya, terutama buat private sector karena dari pemerintah sendiri menyadari bahwa kadang-kadang private sector ternyata geraknya lebih cepat gitu ya Bu ya.
Iya, betul.
Oke, terima kasih Bu Laksmi. Oke, since we are running out of time, so we are gonna close this panel with the last round of questions. Since it is very valuable and rare occasions that three of you sits together here, so I'd like to take advice from each of you. Starting from Sarah, what's your advice for Amarta, knowing that what we have done, what we are doing, what we are envision for the future? What's your advice for Amarta?
Keep listening to communities and keep listening to the people who are not engaging with your services. Why are they not? You have a range of really good products and practices. So it's like keep deepening that. Understanding who are the people who aren't able to access what you have, and why is that the case? So it's and think about how do we target and get at different groups of people. We know that societies are changing. There's still gender inequality, and and Amarta is doing a really good job of addressing that and calling it out and continuing to push that, and that's really important. So don't stop doing that. It is still remarkable that there are a lot of places that don't recognize gender inequality as a huge issue in financial services and in digital services, that don't recognize that women and men have different needs. So keep shouting about it, but then think, okay, well, what does this look like for young people? What does this look like for indigenous communities? What does this look like for older people? And how is this going to change? And how is this continuing to change? And how do we respond to that? Keep doing that and then more.
Thank you, thank you. Marina, what's your advice for us at Amarta?
Well, first of all, I have to commend you. This is a very smart move to crowdsource ideas on stage and put us on the spot. So two things from me. The first one is really around the topic we already discussed, which is the business management skills and digital economy, business skills. I think there is a huge opportunity for Amarta there. You already have an incredible pool of entrepreneurs that are trying to grow and sustain and expand their businesses. You're reaching with access to finance where it's so hard to reach. So I think the next step is bundling the credit with the business management, digital business management skills. I think this will be a really smart move, not only from the business perspective, but also in terms of empowering your women entrepreneur customers to really kind of take the next steps, just maybe graduating from MSMEs to SMEs, like really kind of expanding their capability to run effective, large, growing businesses. And I think that's really strong for potential for the economy, right? For Indonesia as a whole, creating this kind of powerhouse of growth. So that's the first piece of advice. The second one, if I remember, is on scale. So at this point, you are reaching over 2 million women entrepreneurs. This is so remarkable, especially in the geography of Indonesia. And there's so many more to reach. So I think, I don't have specifics, we can talk offline of what that looks like really doubling down on scaling the model, reaching all corners of the Indonesian market, actually going beyond that. But yeah, that's the two things. Bundling credit with business management skills, services, and then scale and expansion.
Thank you so much for the advice. Thank you Marina. Bu Laksmi, apa pesan-pesan ataupun masukan, feedback dan harapan untuk Amarta?
Ya. Harapannya untuk Amarta tentunya, ayo kita nggak bisa stop sampai di sini, dilanjutkan lagi. Nah kalau tadi apa kiat-kiatnya begitu, tadi diminta untuk closing statement gitu ya. Perempuan tuh nggak bisa sendiri. Perempuan harus bersama-sama together ya. Kemudian saya analoginya membentuk seperti kelompok-kelompok kecil atau bubble-bubble. Nah dari sini kan akan terlihat, karena kalau sendiri tuh nggak akan terlihat. Bubble-bubble ini kemudian di situ dia mengasah dirinya, mengembangkan potensinya, kemudian upskilling tentunya. Nah kemudian kalau dia ada masalah di permodalan, nah kalau udah kelompok lebih enak ya, lebih gampang untuk kontrol, lebih gampang untuk aksesnya, kemudian mereka mendapatkan modal. Demikian juga, nah ini tentu kalau ini sehat permodalan kan, yang memberi modal pun akan bisa memberi perhatian lebih dan lebih lagi untuk meningkatkan lagi kemampuan atau keberdayaan perempuan ini. Nah begitu seterusnya, jadi tidak sendiri, bersinergi, bersama-sama, berkolaborasi dan itu dilakukan secara masif dan terus-menerus. Itu bisa. Iya.
That concludes our panels today. Please give big round of applause to our distinguished panelists. Thank you so much Bu Laksmi, Marina, and Sarah. Thank you.